Hey there! Welcome back to Old Guy Insights. Today we're tackling a big question I hear often, one that stirs up a lot of worry. Hey, are criminals pouring into the U.S. unchecked? If you've been hearing that people are flooding in with no oversight or that dangerous criminals are slipping through the cracks, you're not alone. This goes right to the heart of our national security, and today I'm here to pull back the curtain and reveal what's really happening at the border. Hi, I'm Steve. I've spent years working as a search and rescue pilot, a journalist who investigates scammers, and learning how big systems work. And here's what I know. Border security is complex. It's critical. It's a challenge. There's an entire structure in place to try to keep our borders secure, but it's a massive job. So today I want to break it down clearly for you. Who's getting checked? How are they screened? And what happens if someone has a criminal past, and exactly how people come into the country, both legally and illegally. Hey, before we dive into background checks, let's talk about how people actually enter the country without documentation. You might be surprised by the numbers. While some people cross the border without permission, nearly half of all undocumented immigrants don't cross illegally at all. They arrive legally with a visa and then stay beyond the allotted time. Here's a surprising fact. About 40% of undocumented immigrants in the U.S. came here legally with a visa. They arrived at an airport or border checkpoint with permission. They got background checks to get that visa and then simply didn't leave when they were supposed to. This group includes tourists, students, and temporary workers who overstayed the time allowed. They're technically undocumented now, but they weren't when they first arrived. So 40% of undocumented immigrants don't sneak in. They just stayed too long. Now let's talk about the southern border with Mexico. It gets the most attention when it comes to border security. In 2023, CBP recorded about 2.3 million encounters at the southern border. This number includes people attempting to cross multiple times and those apprehended by Border Patrol. Some people cross hoping for a better life. Others are fleeing danger, and yes, some do have criminal backgrounds. For Border Patrol, the job is to separate those with legitimate needs from those who might pose a threat. One surprising aspect is that of the 100% of people CBP encounters at the southern border, the majority actually turn themselves in voluntarily. In recent years, roughly 60 to 70% of the migrants encountered at the border have surrendered directly to Border Patrol or presented themselves at ports of entry to seek asylum. Many of these individuals are families or individuals fleeing danger in their home countries, and they're not trying to vanish into the U.S. Instead, they actively seek out CBP officers because they want to start the legal asylum process. When someone is apprehended at the southern border or voluntarily turns themselves in, about 75 to 80% of these individuals go through a criminal background check. This includes fingerprints, name checks, and screening against U.S. criminal databases. If they have a U.S. criminal record, Border Patrol will likely catch it. But here's an important point. Not every individual encountered by CBP receives a full background check, and there are a few reasons for this. Resource limitations. CBP has around 20,000 Border Patrol agents, which may sound like a lot, but these agents aren't distributed evenly along the nearly 2,000-mile southern border. Instead, agents are assigned based on need, such as high traffic areas and urban checkpoints, with fewer resources available for remote areas. This uneven distribution means that many stretches of the border still have limited coverage, despite the high number of personnel overall. A 2023 immigration reform bill aimed at expanding CBP funding to improve screening and strengthen resources was blocked in Congress. This bipartisan bill, which had support from both parties, would have provided CBP with the technology and staff needed to close these gaps and ensure comprehensive background checks for all encounters. The bill included increased funds for advanced screening tools, more agents, and improved border technology, but political disagreements, largely about how the funds would be allocated, ultimately led to its failure. Without this funding, CBP is limited in its ability to track everyone effectively. Gotaways. Gotaways are people who evade capture. Around 20-25% of people crossing the border avoid detention and processing entirely. These gotaways are individuals that CBP spotted using various detection methods such as surveillance cameras, motion sensors, or even visual identification. But they didn't have enough agents or resources to intercept or apprehend them. CBP tracks gotaways when movement is detected, but just lacks the personnel or time to make the actual arrests, especially in remote and high-traffic areas. Expedited expulsions under policies like Title 42. Some individuals are turned back immediately due to public health policies like Title 42. These quick expulsions don't include full background checks because the goal is to minimize detention time. This policy prioritizes speed over thoroughness, which can mean that certain individuals don't undergo a full screening but are sent back immediately. Focus on high-risk cases. CBP prioritizes full background checks for individuals showing red flags, like prior U.S. criminal history or suspicious behavior. Families and those with no immediate risk indicators may go through less intensive screenings to help manage the volume. In short, while CBP works hard to check as many individuals as possible, about 75 to 80% of those they apprehend or who turn themselves in receive a full criminal background check. The remaining percentage either evades detection, is quickly expelled, or is prioritized differently based on risk and resource limitations. When it comes to screening individuals for criminal records from other countries, especially in Central America, the U.S. faces several challenges. CBP relies on data from other countries' criminal databases, but not every country keeps detailed records or shares them fully with the U.S. Let's look at how this plays out in Central America as an example, where many migrants originate. Mexico shares extensive information with the U.S. In many cases, if someone has a serious criminal record in Mexico, especially related to organized crime or gang activity, CBP can access this information through existing data sharing agreements. This partnership allows CBP to more reliably check the backgrounds of Mexican nationals who are entering. The Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. They also share some criminal data with the U.S., particularly for individuals involved in gang-related activities like MS-13. However, the quality and depth of those records can vary. Sometimes criminal histories may be incomplete or outdated, meaning that some details might not be accessible to CBP. This makes it harder to get a full picture, but U.S. agencies work with these countries to improve data sharing and track high-risk individuals. Nicaragua presents an even bigger challenge. Due to limited cooperation with the U.S. on criminal record sharing, CBP often has less access to reliable data from Nicaragua. This lack of transparency makes it difficult to determine if a Nicaraguan national has a serious criminal history, which poses additional screening hurdles for CBP officers. When records are incomplete or unavailable, CBP does not simply allow individuals to enter unchecked. In these cases, officers look for additional red flags, such as inconsistencies in a person's story, suspicious behaviors, or associations with known criminal organizations. If a person raises concerns, they can be detained for further investigation or flagged for more intensive screening. CBP officers are trained to spot signs of potential risks and can conduct additional checks through other sources if the initial database is inconclusive. So while the U.S. does rely heavily on international cooperation, CBP officers are aware of these limitations and do not blindly trust incomplete records. The agency uses a layered approach, combining what they have in the databases with on-the-ground experience to make informed decisions, ensuring that people who may pose a threat are carefully scrutinized before they're allowed entry. Each year, around 2 to 5% of people who are screened at the border or an entry point are flagged for further review due to criminal records, security risks, or other concerns. These people are pulled aside for a deeper investigation to assess whether they pose a threat to U.S. safety. If the background check reveals a serious criminal history or security risk, CBP can detain, deport, or conduct additional screenings. The vast majority of flagged individuals are denied entry or detained if their background check shows any significant issues, especially if they are deemed a public safety risk. While a lot of the public conversation about border security has focused on building a wall at the southern border, a wall alone doesn't address all aspects of undocumented immigration. In fact, some of the biggest gaps in our current approach aren't related to physical barriers at all. Take this into account. 40% of undocumented immigrants in the U.S. didn't cross the border illegally. Instead, they entered legally with visas, tourists, students, and workers who just never left. A wall won't prevent people from overstaying their visas, which is a major part of the issue. And on the northern border, which spans over 5,500 miles, a wall isn't even part of the conversation. Walls may slow crossings in key areas, but they don't stop everyone. According to recent reports from Border Patrol, smugglers have been using ladders, ropes, and even makeshift ramps to scale sections of the border wall, which are currently 18 to 30 feet high in many areas. In some cases, ladders are abandoned nearby, showing how easily determined individuals or organized smuggling networks adapt to obstacles. One question that often comes up when we talk about border security is this: why do we keep hearing fear-based messaging around it? Why do certain politicians make it sound like waves of criminals are flooding into the U.S. or that other countries are somehow sending their worst? Well, here's the truth. Fear is a weapon, and in politics, it's one of the most powerful tools out there. When people feel threatened, they're more likely to demand swift, even extreme action, and they're much more likely to support hardline policies that promise to protect them from a manufactured danger. Politicians who want to push for certain agendas, like building walls or tightening immigration policies, know that stirring up worst-case scenarios grabs attention and taps into the deepest human emotions. But here's the kicker. The more people are bombarded with this fear-driven message, the more they believe it. For some, it becomes a kind of reality. They can't shake it because these messages are so relentless, so dramatic. Politicians paint these dire pictures of border chaos, not just to inform, but to provoke, to drive up anger and even outrage in their base. This message becomes the rallying cry, the thing that sticks with people, and it's powerful enough to keep supporters fired up, sometimes even scared. And here's where it gets serious. Many people who respond to these fear-driven messages don't realize they're being manipulated. They come to believe these stories of chaos and danger as if they're the only truth, convinced that what they're hearing is factual, that these dangers are real. But really, they're caught in a carefully crafted narrative that's meant to control their viewpoint. It's a form of fake news, a myth passed off as truth, spreading like wildfire because it's designed to stoke fear and keep people locked in that fear. I mean, take a moment to think about someone you know who might be influenced by this kind of message. Do they seem at all aware of how they're being manipulated? Or are they so convinced by the message that they can't see beyond it? For many, it's hard to have that self-awareness because the message is so intense, so repetitive, that it starts to feel undeniable. Some politicians rely on these messages to distract from other pressing issues. They focus on these dramatic stories to steer attention away from complex issues like healthcare, jobs, or the environment. It's easier to have a border crisis to rally around than to drive and dive into nuanced, challenging topics. In short, this isn't just about border security. This fear-based messaging is a strategy to keep people loyal, to keep them distracted, and to make them feel as though this is the most urgent problem at hand. And too often, the loudest voices aren't offering the clearest picture. So here's the big picture. Most people at the border are getting checked. Border Patrol and other officers use tools like fingerprinting, criminal databases, and international agreements to make sure dangerous people are stopped. And let's set the record straight. There is no evidence that foreign countries are deliberately sending criminals to the U.S. The majority of people crossing are regular individuals looking for better opportunities or safety. Those with criminal backgrounds are flagged, screened, and detained if they're a threat. If this helped clear things up, hit the like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more info, check the video description for links, my notes, and sources. And I've got this video for you to watch next. Hey, you'll like it. Till next time, stay curious, stay awesome, and do good things. See ya.